Under a sky the color of burnt copper, the desert breathed a dry sigh. The road to Canyon Ridge shimmered, endless and empty, until a young woman appeared walking along it, barefoot, her braid undone, the wind carrying pieces of her sorrow like loose strands of hair. Clara Willowhawk, aged 20, had left behind the small cabin where her grandmother's body still lay beneath a blanket of sage. Her parents had long gone to dust, and now even the woman who once hummed lullabies to the spirits was gone. She walked because staying still meant remembering. "I've lost my family," she whispered to the heat. "I need work." Her voice was almost swallowed by the wind, but someone heard it. From the west came the steady rhythm of hooves, and soon a horse and rider emerged through the glare. Jedediah Claiborne, age 30, was a tall man, broad in shoulder, solemn in face, a cowboy known in 3 counties as the Giant of Canyon Ridge. He'd been riding toward town with no real purpose except to keep from thinking. When he saw her, he slowed, tipping his hat out of habit before the sight froze him. The dust around her seemed to glow, and her eyes, dark and deep as creek water after a storm, looked too old for someone so young. "Miss, you hurtin'?" he asked, voice rough from silence. She shook her head, clutching her small bundle of clothes. "Just need a place that'll take a worker." Jed looked at her hands, strong but trembling, and at her worn moccasins near falling apart. "You got anyone here?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "No one left." For a moment neither spoke. A buzzard circled above, and the road stretched on like a question neither knew how to answer. Jed cleared his throat. "I could use help on my ranch. Ain't much, but it's honest. Pays fair." Clara studied him, wary. Strangers in these lands often smiled first before turning cruel. But his eyes, pale gray as dusk, held no pity, just a quiet loneliness that matched her own. "All right," she said at last. He nodded once, and they rode together through the rippling heat. The town watched them pass, one giant cowboy and one orphan native girl. Curtains twitched, whispers followed. Sheriff Harlan Briggs leaned against the post outside the jailhouse, arms folded, eyes cold. "Claiborne," he called, "you pickin' up strays now?" Jed didn't stop. "Ain't no stray if she's got work," he said, his tone low. Clara lowered her gaze, shame and anger twisting in her chest. At the edge of town stood the Claiborne Ranch, a wide stretch of land that smelled of horses, hay, and loneliness. Jed helped her down from the horse but didn't touch her again. "You can stay in the small cabin by the barn," he said. "Chores start before sunrise." "I understand," she replied, voice steady though her heart thundered. That night she lit a candle and unpacked her bundle. A comb, her grandmother's woven shawl, and a single feather she'd kept since childhood. Outside, the wind pressed against the cabin walls, and she felt the weight of emptiness creep in. Yet somewhere out there, she heard a low humming, the cowboy's voice carrying a tune through the night. It was rough but gentle, like a memory trying to comfort itself. By morning, she was already in the garden, sleeves rolled, bare feet sunk in cool soil. Jed watched from the porch, pretending to fix a saddle strap though the strap had been fine for weeks. The way she moved, careful but strong, reminded him of the river after rain, fierce yet soft around the edges. Days passed. Words came slow between them, but gestures began to speak. A pot of coffee left by the stable door, a small wooden comb he carved and left near her cabin step. Sometimes, when the evening light burned the sky gold, Clara sang to the horses, old songs her grandmother taught her in the tongue of the river people. Jed didn't understand the words, but he knew the ache they carried. The town didn't take kindly to change. Miss Eliza May, who ran the saloon, warned him kindly but firmly. "Jed, you know what folks are sayin'. They see her workin' your land, they think you've lost your wits." "Let 'em talk," Jed said, but his jaw tightened. The whispers grew like weeds. Some said the girl bewitched him. Others spat when Clara walked through town for supplies. Sheriff Briggs rode out one evening, dust trailing behind his horse like smoke from a fire. "You're stirrin' trouble, Claiborne," he said, dismounting with a sneer. "She don't belong here." Jed's hand hovered near his belt. She's done nothing wrong. Briggs' smile was thin. Tell that to the folks losing business, 'cause they won't sell to your kind anymore. My kind. Jed said softly, the words heavy. The sheriff's eyes flicked toward the cabin. Her kind, Claiborne. You'll run her off, or the town'll do it for you. Clara, listening from the barn, froze. She waited until they were gone, then went inside, heart thudding like hooves against dry earth. She began to pack quietly, the feather, the shawl, her comb. Before dawn, she slipped into the storm. Thunder rolled across the desert. The sky broke open. Jed woke to the sound of rain hammering the roof and saw her cabin door wide open. He saddled his horse without thinking. Lightning lit the horizon. He found her hours later by the dry creek, soaked, shivering, her bundle ruined by mud. She looked up as he dismounted, too tired to speak. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. He knelt beside her, rain running down his face. You shouldn't have left. When he lifted her into his arms, she didn't resist. The storm roared, as if the world itself was trying to wash them clean. Back at the ranch, he built a fire, his hands trembling as he wrapped her in blankets. When she woke, he was beside her, drying her hair with an old towel. Why did you come? She asked again, softer this time. He hesitated, the firelight catching in his eyes. Because I couldn't stand the world without your voice in it. For a long moment, silence lived between them, and the rain slowed to a whisper. Clara leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion melting into something fragile and new. He didn't move. The warmth between them wasn't fire. It was something steadier, older, like the earth remembering sunlight after winter. But peace is a thin blanket in the Wild West. Days later, Sheriff Briggs returned with 2 deputies. We've had reports, he said, smirking. Something missing from the general store. Thought we'd start here. You think she stole? Jed asked, voice calm but dangerous. The sheriff shrugged. Her people have a history. Clara stepped out from the doorway, eyes clear. You call me thief, she said, but it's you who take what you don't understand. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Jed stepped beside her. You'll be leaving now, Sheriff. Briggs' hand brushed his holster, but something in Jed's stance, unflinching, patient, made him stop. The rain had begun again, a slow rhythm against the dust. You'll regret this, the sheriff muttered, then rode off, the deputies trailing behind. Clara turned to Jed, chest heaving. You shouldn't have risked that. He smiled faintly. A man's got to stand somewhere. That night, he carved something by the fire, a small ring from a scrap of horse bone, smooth and simple. In the morning, he found her in the garden, the storm having left puddles that mirrored the sky. He held out the ring. I ain't rich, he said, voice low, but I can promise you peace, as best as I can make it. Clara looked at the ring, then at him, the man who'd faced the whole town for her. Peace, she said softly, is more than I ever hoped for. She took the ring, and with it she took his hand. They were married a week later beneath a cottonwood tree near the river. Miss Eliza brought flowers from her window boxes. The preacher spoke simple words that trembled with dust and sunlight. Clara wore her grandmother's shawl, and Jed's shirt was freshly washed but still bore a tear near the cuff, a mark of imperfection that felt right. When the vows were said, the wind rose, carrying petals and the scent of rain. Clara closed her eyes and felt, for the first time, that her grandmother might be smiling somewhere just beyond the light. Years passed. The whispers faded like ghost tracks in the sand. The ranch flourished. Laughter echoed where silence used to sit heavy. On summer nights they would sit by the porch, Jed whittling, Clara humming the river songs, and the world would seem briefly kind. I know this because I was there, long ago, a young hand passing through that country. I saw them once. He taller than any man I'd met, she small and radiant beside him, her braid shining like black silk in the sun. Folks said their love didn't change the West, but I think it softened it. The land learned a new kind of quiet. If you ever ride through Canyon Ridge now, you'll find a cottonwood tree by the bend of the river. Beneath it, two stones stand side by side, weathered but holding fast. And sometimes, when the dusk settles low and the wind stirs through the grass, you might hear a faint song floating through the air, part river, part memory. Maybe that's what love becomes out here. Not thunder, not fire, but the hush after both have passed. Maybe it's just two souls who stopped running long enough to let the world catch up with them. And maybe, if you listen closely, you'll understand what Jed Claiborne saw that day on the road, a young woman walking alone through dust and grief, carrying the whole sky in her eyes, and how in that moment, the giant cowboy found not just someone to save, but someone who could save him too.